So, okay, imagine that you're just sitting in the middle of a completely destroyed city. Like the life you knew is just totally off the rails. Your home is gone.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, you know deep down that your own terrible decisions, like they helped burn it all to the ground.
Right.
You're just sitting in the rubble of your own making. And then someone walks up to you and says, hey, take comfort. The future is going to be beautiful.
Oh, man.
Right. Like you would probably want to throw a brick at them.
Absolutely.
It feels dismissive. It feels like, it feels like they are entirely ignoring the crushing reality of what you're actually living through, like toxic positivity.
It feels like an insult to your suffering.
Yeah.
Because when someone tries to just, paste a shiny, happy slogan over profound grief, it doesn't heal anything. It just alienates the person who is hurting. And that psychological dynamic, the friction between present devastation and the promise of future hope, that is exactly the historical reality we're stepping into today.
Right. Which brings us to our topic. Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today we are looking at a massive stack of, it's historical theology, linguistic breakdowns, and these really ancient commentaries, all centered entirely on one extraordinary chapter of ancient text, which is Isaiah 51.
Yeah, it's a huge one.
It really is. And our mission today is to sort of figure out how this specific chapter acts as like a divine alarm clock for a broken, discouraged people. We're going to unpack how it offers a masterclass in true comfort, a stark warning to the arrogant, and paints this really vivid portrait of divine rescue.
Exact.
But, to understand it, we first have to understand the people it was actually written for. We are talking about the nation of Israel, and they are facing the terrifying Babylonian exile.
Right, and that exile is the crucial context here, because the Israelites, they had lost their homes, their temple, their autonomy.
Everything.
But more than that, they had lost their theological bearings.
Wow, yeah.
Because for generations, they had operated under a covenant with God. And due to just persistent historical rebellion, that covenant had been broken.
Right.
And the Babylonians, they were the instrument of that consequence. So they aren't just in, physical exile. They are in a deep mental and spiritual exile. They're experiencing the very real, very just consequences of their actions.
So I have to wonder, how does an ancient reader even process a text like this when they're in that specific state of mind? Because before we even look at the specific arguments in chapter 51, our sources continually highlight the unique authority of the entire book of Isaiah.
Oh, yeah.
Commentators refer to it as the fifth gospel.
Yes.
Which I've seen that phrase multiple times in our research, and that is a massive claim to make about an Old Testament scroll.
It is a massive claim, but historically and textually, it really holds up. Yeah, because the book of Isaiah is so expansive in its vision, and it's so highly specific in its descriptions of a coming savior. It reads almost like a New Testament account written, centuries before the fact. Right. But the true authority of Isaiah, it actually comes from how Jesus Christ interacted with it.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, throughout the New Testament records, Jesus actually uses Isaiah to authenticate his own identity and his ministry.
Well, yeah, a great example of that is the account in Luke chapter 4, right?
Exactly, yes.
Where Jesus walks into the synagogue in Nazareth, and he doesn't just pick a random text to read. He deliberately unrolls the scroll of Isaiah.
He finds the exact spot.
Right, finds the spot, reads a prophecy about the Spirit of the Lord bringing good news to the poor, and then he just sits down and essentially says, today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing.
Yeah, he drops the mic, basically. And he does something really similar in Mark 7, where he's quoting Isaiah to expose the spiritual blindness of the religious leaders of his era.
Right.
And the implication of that is profound. By utilizing the text this way, Jesus is giving absolute canonical authority to Isaiah's words.
Okay.
He's validating the structural integrity of the prophet's message.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so when we analyze Isaiah 51 today, what's fascinating here is that we're not just dissecting a dead piece of ancient political commentary. We're looking at a theological architecture that moves, seamlessly from the ancient past. It addresses the immediate present, and then it pushes forward into what theologians call the eschatological future.
Okay, let me stop you right there because we want to keep this accessible.
Sure.
When you say eschatological future, break that down for the listener. We're talking about the ultimate end of the world, right? Like how the entire human story wraps up.
That is exactly correct.
Yeah.
Eschatology is simply the study of final things. So, the end of the current age, the final judgment, and ultimate restoration.
Right.
In this chapter, it bridges the gap between a historical crisis in Babylon and the final eternal restoration of the cosmos. And the way it begins that bridge, it's with a command.
Okay.
The text opens with this divine summons to those who are, trying to seek righteousness amidst all this chaos. And the command is to look back. God says, hearken to me. And then he says, look unto the rock whence ye are hewn, and to the hole of the pit whence ye are digged.
It is such a fascinating geological metaphor.
Yeah.
Because God doesn't say, look at the sky or look at your feelings.
Right.
He tells them to imagine a massive ancient stone quarry.
Mm-hmm.
He's essentially commanding them to practice the sort of theological archaeology, like to look at the bedrock they were cut from.
Yes.
And the text doesn't even leave this as a vague poetic concept, right?
Yeah.
Because the very next sentence explicitly identifies the rock.
Yeah.
God says, look unto Abraham your father and unto Sarah that bare you.
Exactly. And this grounds the entire theological argument in historical reality.
Okay.
Abraham and Sarah, they are the foundational anchor for this covenant nation. Now, you have to consider the psychological state of the Israelites in Babylon right now.
Right. They're devastated.
Right. They feel small. They feel like this tiny, insignificant remnant that's just about to be swallowed whole by a massive global empire.
Yeah.
They're looking at their depleted numbers and they're assuming, well, our story is over.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because that creates this incredible irony. God points them to their origins, and their origin story is arguably more pathetic than their current situation in Babylon.
Oh, 100%.
Right. God is essentially saying, you think you are small and helpless right now. Remember how this entire nation started. It started with one singular wandering old man and a woman who was entirely barren.
Right.
I mean, they were a biological and historical dead end.
A complete dead end. The text actually emphasizes that precisely. God says, for I called him alone. One man.
Just one.
Humanly speaking, building a massive nation from Abraham and Sarah was a mathematical impossibility. But God took that zero, blessed it, and multiplied it. And the underlying logic here is so crucial. God is demonstrating that his economy of power, it doesn't rely on human momentum.
Interesting.
He routinely initiates his most monumental works using raw materials that the world considers just entirely insignificant.
I can totally see how that applies psychologically today. Like when a person feels completely spiritually barren, or when they hit a wall in their life where every single circumstance just screams that it's over.
Yeah.
The natural human instinct is to stare at the wall.
Right, exactly. We obsess over the present obstacle.
Yeah, but this text demands the exact opposite reaction. It demands that we dig backward. Like we have to look at the historical bedrock of God's past faithfulness in order to guarantee his future promises.
That's spot on. And the future promise he issues next in the chapter is staggering.
Okay.
Because God doesn't just promise to, patch up the ruins of Jerusalem.
Right, a little drywall and some paint.
Right, no. He states that he will comfort Zion's waste places, and then he uses a very specific comparison. He promises to make her wilderness like Eden and her desert like the garden of the Lord.
Wow. Moving from a devastated Babylonian wasteland to the Garden of Eden?
Yeah.
I mean, that is not just a restoration project. That is a complete reversal of the Genesis curse.
Exactly. It's the movement from desolation back to original uncorrupted creation. And this is where the text points way beyond the immediate historical moment.
Because Jerusalem never actually became that, right?
Right. Rebuilding physical Jerusalem after the exile, that was important. But historical Jerusalem never became a literal, flawless Eden.
Right.
So this language typologically points forward. It's a foreshadowing of the new heavens and the new earth that's described all the way at the end of the Bible in Revelation 22.
Okay, wow.
It establishes the premise that God's redemptive plan doesn't just fix broken things. It elevates them to a state of absolute uncorrupted joy and thanksgiving.
So if God's power is truly capable of reversing the curse of Eden, it kind of completely changes how we should view our current temporary reality, doesn't it?
It does.
And that seems to be the pivot point for the next section of the text, verses 4 through 8. Because God introduces this massive contrast between the eternal nature of his salvation and the decaying nature of the physical universe.
Right.
He announces that his law and his justice will become a light to the nations, or the Gentiles, right? The distant isles.
Yeah. And notice the expansion of the covenant there, by the way.
What do you mean?
Well, the hope being offered isn't just a tribal victory for Israel anymore. It's a global illumination. God's salvation is destined to light up the entire world.
Oh, I see.
But to prove the permanence of this salvation, he uses a physical comparison that must have sounded so radical to an ancient audience. He says, "Lift up your eyes to the heavens and look upon the earth beneath. For the heavens shall vanish away like smoke, and the earth shall wax old like a garment."
It's crazy because we treat the physical earth, the ground under our feet, as the ultimate symbol of permanence.
Right, solid ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But God compares the entire cosmos to an old pair of work pants.
Yes.
He is basically saying the material world is impermanent, it's wearing out, the knees are going to blow out, and eventually it's just going to be discarded.
It's a profound philosophical claim, and it actually aligns perfectly with what New Testament writers would later echo.
Like who?
Well, the Apostle Peter, in his second letter, he uses this exact conceptual framework. He describes the heavens passing away with a great noise and the elements melting with fervent heat.
Oh, wow, right?
The physical universe has an expiration date, but God contrasts this cosmic decay with his own nature. He states, "My salvation shall be forever, and my righteousness shall not be abolished."
Which leads to a very practical, almost satirical application regarding human enemies.
Oh, I love this part.
Right, because if the universe itself is temporary, then the terrifying human oppressors of Israel are even less significant. God tells the people who know his law not to fear the scorn of men, because, according to the text, the moth will eat them up like a garment, and the worm will eat them like wool.
It is brilliant, ancient satire. Just think about the empires of the ancient Near East, right?
Yeah.
You've got these massive armies, these sadistic rulers, towering monuments built to their own glory.
Very intimidating.
Very. And the prophet just reduces all of that terrifying human power to insect food.
Right.
The moth and the worm, they're agents of slow, silent, just unstoppable decay.
One of the commentaries we reviewed highlighted the Message translation here, which phrases it as their mockeries coming from brains that are termite-ridden.
Yes, that is such a great phrase.
I find that image so helpful. Like, imagine a terrifying dictator throwing a tantrum, or, a modern online mob canceling you.
Right.
You're living under the crushing weight of public shame, or facing a regime that can literally dictate whether you live or die. You are losing sleep, you're paralyzed by their opinions, and God essentially taps you on the shoulder and asks, "Why are you terrified of termite food?"
It really exposes the illusion of human power.
Yeah.
Sociologically and psychologically, this text is demanding complete freedom from the fear of man.
Yeah.
Why do we assign so much metaphysical weight to the shifting opinions of a temporary world?
Right, because their insults, their power structures, their empires, they are all destined for the moth.
Exactly. But God's setting of things right, his righteousness, is the only reality that will never become obsolete.
I love that concept. But I have to admit, it creates a massive tension for me.
How so?
Well, if God's salvation is truly eternal and these human empires are just waiting to be eaten by moths, why were the Israelites still sitting in Babylonian dirt? Right?
Yeah.
Like, if I am an Israelite hearing this, my immediate reaction would be, okay, if you're that powerful, prove it. Like, do something right now. And that tension seems to just explode in the next section of the chapter, verses 9 through 11, because the people, the prophetic remnant, they cry out with this intense, almost aggressive plea. They yell, "Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord, awake as in the ancient days."
Right. The contrast you just pointed out, that is exactly what drives this cry. The prophetic voice is screaming for that eternal cosmic salvation to manifest in their real-time historical present.
They want action.
They're desperate for God to repeat the miracles of the Exodus. They want to see the power that birthed their nation.
And the specific language they use to describe the Exodus is so fascinating to me. They ask God if he isn't the one who cut Rahab, wounded the dragon, and dried up the waters of the great deep.
Yes.
To a modern listener, Rahab and the dragon sounds like something pulled straight out of, a fantasy novel.
It really does.
So I need you to unpack the ancient Near Eastern context here.
Okay.
Because they aren't talking about a literal fire-breathing reptile, are they?
No, they're not. They are utilizing the cultural and theological language of their day.
Okay.
So in ancient Near Eastern mythology, the sea and the sea dragon were these universal symbols of cosmic chaos, of untamed evil and destruction.
Okay.
Historically, in this text, Rahab and the dragon represent the empire of Egypt and the Pharaoh. So God crushed that empire at the Red Sea to let his ransomed people pass over.
Okay, so by parting the Red Sea, God wasn't just like executing a political escape plan for Hebrew slaves.
Exactly. From a theological perspective, it was an unseen, behind-the-scenes spiritual victory over the forces of chaos and Satan.
Wow.
The parting of the great deep becomes the ultimate biblical template for redemption. It proves God has the authority to just make a way through impossible, chaotic evil.
But let me push back on the framing of this prayer for a second.
Sure.
Because the prophet is literally yelling at God to awake. It sounds borderline disrespectful, like as if they're accusing God of sleeping on the job while Jerusalem burned and Babylon took over. How did ancient audiences interpret that level of raw anger directed at the Creator?
Well, the ancient Hebrew understanding of prayer allowed for a level of raw, emotive honesty that often makes modern readers, a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'd say so.
The text isn't implying that God is literally asleep. This is what we call a liturgical lament.
Okay.
When humanity is enduring profound suffering, it objectively feels like God is dormant, and the prophet is giving voice to that agonizing human experience. But notice the underlying faith here.
What do you mean?
They are appealing to God's established character. You don't yell at someone to wake up and save you unless you genuinely believe they have the power to do so.
Right. If you didn't think he could do anything, you wouldn't bother waking him up.
Exactly.
And the specific power they are calling upon is the arm of the Lord, which we've seen that phrase in our sources, and it's not just a poetic metaphor for God doing some heavy lifting, right? It has a very specific theological trajectory in the book of Isaiah.
It really does. So in Hebrew thought, the arm is the seat of action and agency. The arm of the Lord is God's active, saving agency breaking into human history.
Okay.
And if we follow the structural architecture of Isaiah's scroll, this becomes incredibly profound. Because if you connect this to the bigger picture, just 2 chapters later, in Isaiah 53, the prophet asks a really famous question.
What's the question?
He asks, "To whom is the arm of the Lord revealed?"
Oh, wow.
And then he immediately launches into the most detailed description of the suffering servant, the Messiah, who is despised, rejected, and crushed for our iniquities.
So the text is explicitly linking the arm of the Lord from chapter 51 directly to the coming Christ.
Yes.
Jesus is the arm of Yahweh.
Jesus Christ is the incarnate arm of the Lord. He is God's power made flesh, reaching down into that human quarry we talked about earlier.
Right, the pit.
Exactly. And the New Testament writers understood this connection perfectly. When Christ goes to the cross and rises again, that is the ultimate awakening that definitively slays the cosmic dragon.
Oh, man.
The Apostle Paul writes in Colossians chapter 2 that at the cross, Christ spoiled principalities and powers, making a public spectacle of them.
Wow.
He didn't just defeat the Roman Empire or, the religious elite. He defeated the ultimate unseen chaos of sin and death.
That brings a completely different weight to this cry for God to awake. Like, it's not just about Babylon anymore.
Not at all.
But what really fascinates me is how God responds to this desperate screaming in verses 12 through 16.
Yes.
The people are yelling for him to flex his muscles like he did in Egypt, and God's response completely flips the script. It's as if he looks at them and says, "I am not the one who is asleep. You are."
That divine response is an absolute masterstroke of psychological insight. God begins with this profound, emphatic intimacy. He says, "I, even I, am he that comforteth you." So he takes direct personal responsibility for their comfort.
Right.
But then he pivots into this devastating cognitive rebuke. He asks them, "Who art thou, that thou shouldest be afraid of a man that shall die, and of the Son of Man which shall be made as grass? And forgettest the Lord thy Maker, that hath stretched forth the heavens and laid the foundations of the earth?"
Ouch. I mean, it is the ultimate diagnosis of human anxiety.
It really is.
God is pointing out the profound cognitive dissonance of how we process fear. We quake like leaves in the wind before human tyrants. Or, according to our modern lifestyle, we paralyze ourselves over daily stressors, financial fears, social anxieties, and political uncertainties.
Right.
We grant these temporary grass-like things immense power over our mental state, while simultaneously suffering from this chronic amnesia regarding the God who literally hung the stars in the vacuum of space.
The Theological term for that is the fear of man, and it is a direct symptom of forgetting the magnitude of the Creator. When the majesty of God shrinks in our minds, the threats of the world inevitably expand.
So what does this all mean in practice? It reminds me of, imagine a child who wakes up terrified of a shadow on their bedroom wall, right?
Okay, yeah.
The child is crying, totally paralyzed by the shape of a monster in the dark.
Sure.
But sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the child's hand, is their father. And their father happens to be the heavyweight boxing champion of the world.
Right.
To the child, the fear of the shadow is overwhelmingly real. But objectively, it is completely illogical given who is sitting right next to them in the room. The threat seems immense until you measure it against the protector.
That analogy perfectly captures the dynamic of verse 16. Because God says to them, I have put my words in thy mouth, and I have covered thee in the shadow of mine hand. So while God is busy planting the heavens and laying the foundations of the earth, orchestrating the incomprehensible mechanics of the cosmos, he is simultaneously hiding his people in the shadow of his hand.
It's just the perfect equilibrium of infinite sovereignty and intimate tenderness.
Exactly.
Now, that offer of comfort is beautiful, but the chapter does not end on a soft note, does it?
No, it shifts drastically.
Tone gets really intense. In verses 17 through 23, God moves from offering intimate comfort to addressing the brutal, undeniable reality of their suffering.
Right.
He explains the mechanics of exactly why they have been staggering in the dark and how he intends to deal with it.
And we arrive at the second divine summons to awake. But this time, God isn't telling his own power to awake. He is commanding the ruined city to stand up.
Awake! Stand up, O Jerusalem!
Exactly. He says, awake! Awake, stand up, O Jerusalem, which hast drunk at the hand of the Lord the cup of his fury.
The imagery used here to describe sin and judgment is incredibly visceral. Jerusalem is personified as a mother who has been forced to drink this terrifying cup of wrath down to the very dregs. And the result of drinking it is a divine hangover. The text describes her as being drunken, but not with wine.
Yes.
I want to pause on this metaphor of the cup. Where does this idea of a cup of fury even come from?
So in the ancient Near East, a cup poured out by a king often symbolized a person's allotted destiny or their portion, whether that was for blessing or for judgment.
Okay, like a royal decree of your fate.
Right. And in biblical literature, the cup of wrath becomes a central metaphor for the holy, unmitigated justice of God poured out against unrepentant rebellion.
Okay.
The text is illustrating the nature of sin in a way that our modern culture usually just glosses over.
How so?
Well, we tend to view sin as just a list of broken rules or maybe bad habits.
Right, minor mistakes.
But this text shows that when persistent rebellion meets the holy justice of God, the result is trauma, profound confusion, and spiritual stupor.
And the metaphor shifts, again, to describe the absolute exhaustion of this judgment. Because the text says that Jerusalem's sons have fainted, and they are lying at the head of all the streets as a wild bull in a net. Why a bull in a net? That's such a specific image.
Well, think about the mechanics of a net, right?
Okay.
A net implies you have been trapped by a force far greater than yourself. Now, a wild bull is immensely strong. Its instinct is to fight, to thrash around, to exert power to break free.
Right.
But the more the bull fights the net, the more entangled and exhausted it becomes, until it finally just collapses in the dirt, entirely depleted.
Oh, wow.
It perfectly describes the psychological and spiritual trap of chronic rebellion against God. The more humanity thrashes against divine order, the more entangled and devastated it becomes. Jerusalem has hit absolute rock bottom. She is completely incapacitated.
It says there is no one to guide her, no one to take her by the hand. They are entirely spent.
Yes.
And this is the moment, precisely at the point of total collapse and inability, that God introduces the great reversal. Because Jerusalem couldn't put the cup of trembling down herself. She was paralyzed by it, tangled up like that bull. But God steps in as her ultimate defense attorney. He declares, "Behold, I have taken out of thine hand the cup of trembling. Thou shalt no more drink it again."
It is an act of pure, unmerited grace. He physically removes the chalice of poison from her trembling fingers.
Just takes it right out of her hands.
But the reversal is absolute, because he then forces that same cup into the hands of her sadistic oppressors.
Right.
The text specifically identifies those who afflicted her, those who literally told her soul to bow down so they could walk over her.
Right. Our sources detail that ancient practice where conquerors would force captive people to lie flat in the dirt, face down.
Yes.
So the victorious army could use their bodies as a paved road for their boots. I mean, it is the ultimate display of humiliation and cruelty.
Disgusting, yeah.
And God is saying, justice is coming. The cup of my fury is passing from the oppressed to the oppressor. It is a terrifying warning to anyone who abuses power and tramples the vulnerable.
It really is. God's justice does not sleep forever. But this raises an important question, right, then. We have to address the underlying theological mechanism here.
Okay, what do you mean?
How can a perfectly holy, perfectly just God simply take the cup of wrath away from a guilty people? Because sin requires justice. God cannot simply, pour the cup out onto the dirt and pretend the rebellion never happened.
Right. A good judge can't just let the criminal walk free without a penalty.
Exactly. The demands of divine justice must be satisfied. So where does the cup go?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If the cup isn't poured out on the ground, someone still has to drink it. And this is where our research draws a massive, unavoidable line directly to the New Testament. To understand the cup in Isaiah 51, you really have to look at the Garden of Gethsemane in Matthew 26.
The connection is absolutely undeniable.
Yeah.
Because on the night before his crucifixion, Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. He is in agony, sweating drops of blood under the crushing psychological weight of what is about to happen. And he prays a very specific prayer. "Oh, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me."
Wow. He's asking about the cup, the exact same cup of trembling we've been looking at in Isaiah.
Precisely. Jesus is stepping into the narrative to become the structural theological substitute. The judicial wrath that made Israel stagger, the judgment that trapped humanity like a bull in a net, it's taken out of our hands and placed directly into the hands of the incarnate Son of God.
Yeah.
Jesus drinks the dregs of that exact cup of divine fury. He consumes the judgment so that sinners might be offered the cup of salvation instead.
The mechanics of that substitution are just staggering. Like the grace offered to Jerusalem, and by extension to us, it wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
It wasn't God just waving a magic wand and dismissing justice. The grace was paid for in full because the arm of the Lord allowed himself to be crushed by the cup.
It is the central engine of the gospel, hidden right here in the ancient architecture of Isaiah's prophecy.
Yeah.
God's mercy is made possible because God himself absorbs the justice.
So if we step back and look at the macro view of this entire chapter, what does this reveal about God's grand overarching narrative for history?
It's a great question.
Because Israel has been through an unbelievable cycle of rebellion, exile, destruction, and scattering. And honestly, many people look at the history of Israel and assume their covenant must be permanently voided.
But this chapter proves definitively that God has an unyielding, permanent plan for the physical nation of Israel.
Right.
Despite their profound rebellion, God's declaration here is that he has not permanently cast them aside. We actually reviewed Commentary by Dr. J. Vernon McGee, and he utilizes a very helpful dispensational illustration to explain this overarching plan.
Okay, really quick, I want to clarify dispensational for our listeners.
That's right.
We're talking about a theological framework that sees God interacting with humanity differently across various eras or dispensations of history, right? Particularly regarding the distinction between Israel and the Christian church.
Correct. So dispensational theology recognizes that God made specific, irrevocable promises to the nation of Israel that are distinct from his promises to the church.
Got it.
And Dr. McGee explains this using the analogy of a massive rail system.
Okay, like trains?
Yeah, trains. God is running a twofold program in the world. Right now, you can think of the nation of Israel as a train that has been temporarily placed on a sidetrack.
Okay.
And meanwhile, God has brought the church train out onto the main line, bringing the message of salvation to the Gentiles and the distant ends of the earth, which is just as Isaiah prophesied earlier in the chapter.
Right, a light to the Gentiles. But the critical point of the analogy is that a train on a sidetrack is not a wrecked train.
Exactly. Observers might look at the sidetrack train of Israel and assume, well, it's been abandoned to rust. But McGee points out, and Isaiah 51 demands, that the train is merely waiting. When the current era reaches its appointed station, God will pull the Israel train back onto the main line.
Wow.
He will fulfill every single promise of restoration he made to Zion. His covenants are entirely reliable.
Which brings us to the deeply personal application of this text.
Yeah.
Because if God deals with a stubborn, historically rebellious nation with that level of persistent, unbreakable grace, the implications for the individual believer are just massive.
Absolutely.
It means that no matter how far away we get from God, like no matter how deeply we have entangled ourselves in the net of our own making, or how much of the cup of consequences we have had to drink, God doesn't give up on us if our hearts truly turn back to him.
The theological takeaway here is that divine discipline, while it may be severe and incredibly painful, it is fundamentally redemptive. It is not final abandonment. The cup of wrath is not God's final gift to those who seek him. Comfort, salvation, and a restored Eden are. He began the chapter by saying, I, even I, am he that comforteth you. And he proved it by ultimately taking the cup from their hands.
Isaiah 51 really is an alarm clock. It's designed to wake us out of our spiritual apathy, to shatter the paralyzing fear of man, and to cure our chronic amnesia regarding God's true power. I mean, it takes the reader on this journey from the historical quarry of Abraham's impossible faith through the decaying wardrobe of the physical cosmos, all the way to the eschatological promise where the arm of the Lord takes our cup of trembling.
It's an amazing journey. It forces the listener to make a fundamental choice about their perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that leads us to a crucial final thought for anyone analyzing this text.
Let's hear it.
Well, we read earlier that the physical heavens and the earth are going to wear out like an old, discarded garment. The cosmos is temporary.
Right, the work pants.
Work pants, right. Yet, if we are honest, we spend 99% of our time, our money, and our emotional energy obsessively investing in a wardrobe that God explicitly states is destined for the moth.
Oh, wow. So the provocative question we all have to mull over is this. What would our daily lives actually look like if we stopped fearing termite food and truly began living as if God's righteousness is the only reality that will survive the end of the universe?
That is a phenomenal question to end on. If we truly lived like that, his righteousness is the only permanent reality. Everything else falls into place. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Go read Isaiah 51 for yourself, and we'll catch you on the next one.